1:47 in the morning. Every camera at her home goes dark, but inside this 84-year-old woman's chest, a small medical device keeps recording. It logs her heart rate spiking. It timestamps the exact second her body shifts into a state of fear. It tracks her movement, changing from voluntary to passive. And in the final minutes of that recording, it captures something the FBI has spent months analyzing: a physiological pattern that tells investigators exactly what was done to her and narrows down who could have done it. Her name is Nancy Guthrie. She is the mother of Savannah Guthrie. She has been missing for over 90 days, and the person who took her disabled every camera, avoided every witness, and left almost no trace. Almost. Because they did not know about the device inside her. They did not know it was recording. And they did not know that every second of what they did to Nancy that night was being logged, time-stamped, and uploaded to a cloud server before they even left the property. This is Justice Over Everything. Uncover the truth, demand justice. If you believe cases like this deserve real answers, subscribe now. Because what the FBI found inside that data has never been fully broken down until this video. Here is what Nancy's pacemaker recorded. Before the data, before the timestamps, before the FBI forensic cardiac team started pulling apart what her body recorded that night, there was just Nancy. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She was born in Fort Wright, Kentucky. In 1942, she moved to the Tucson area in the early 1970s with her family and never left. She raised 3 children, Savannah, Annie, and Cameron, largely on her own after her husband Charles died at 49 during a mining exploration trip in Mexico in 1988. She did not remarry. She did not seek attention. She built a quiet life in the Catalina foothills, a residential neighborhood north of Tucson with wide streets, low traffic, and the kind of silence that makes people feel safe. Her family describes her as mentally sharp and independent. She lived alone. She kept her garden. She attended church. She had a routine, and the people around her knew it. On the evening of January 31st, 2026, Nancy had dinner with her daughter Annie at Annie's home in Tucson. It was a normal evening, nothing unusual, nothing out of place. Afterward, Annie's husband, Tommaso Cioni, drove Nancy home to her house on North Jenna Drive. He dropped her off at approximately 9:50 p.m. She went inside. That is the last confirmed moment anyone saw Nancy Guthrie. The next morning, she was supposed to join a friend to watch an online church service. She did not show up. The friend contacted the family. By late morning, relatives went to the house to check on her. They searched the property. Her phone was inside. Her personal belongings were untouched. There was no sign of Nancy. Around noon on February 1st, the family called 911. Between 9:50 the previous night and noon the next day, over 14 hours passed. And in that window, something happened inside that house that Nancy's cameras only partially captured, and that her pacemaker recorded in full. But here is what makes that timeline so critical. Nancy was not found missing for nearly half a day. In a case involving an 84-year-old woman living alone, those hours matter. Every minute between the event and the first call to law enforcement is a minute the person responsible uses to disappear. And by the time anyone realized Nancy was gone, whoever took her had a 14-hour head start. Deputies arrived at Nancy's home on February 1st and immediately saw signs of a forced encounter. Drops of blood on the front porch, a back door left open, Nancy's personal belongings still inside, phone, essentials, everything she would need to leave voluntarily. She had not taken a single item with her. Within hours, investigators pulled footage from Nancy's doorbell camera. The recording showed a masked figure approaching the front door at approximately 1:47 a.m. The individual was dressed in all black, slim build, estimated 5'9" to 5'10", wearing gloves, carrying a backpack later identified as a black 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack. The figure appeared armed, with a holster visible, and held what appeared to be a bite flashlight in his mouth. Then the camera went dark, disabled. That footage became the only visual evidence of what happened that night, and what it showed raised immediate questions. The figure was calm, not Rushed, not panicked. Former FBI profiler Jim Clemento later analyzed the blood evidence on the porch and concluded the spatter pattern was consistent with someone who was close to the ground, on their knees or lying down, not standing upright in a struggle. Nancy may have already been incapacitated within moments of the encounter beginning. But here is where the investigation hit its first serious problem. The Pima County Sheriff's Department took the lead. The FBI offered assistance immediately, and according to FBI Director Kash Patel, the Bureau was kept out of the investigation for 4 days. 4 days in a missing persons case involving an 84-year-old woman living alone. The FBI later stated that it was only after they were brought in that investigators were able to access the critical doorbell camera footage. A sergeant within the sheriff's own department, Aaron Cross, later described those early days publicly. He called it a disorganized mess. He said detectives within the same department were not communicating about which witnesses they had already interviewed. Tracking was not occurring. The coordination that a case of this magnitude required simply was not there. And while that chaos was unfolding on the ground, critical evidence was sitting in a cloud server, untouched. Nancy's pacemaker had been transmitting cardiac data to a home monitoring unit in her bedroom up until 2:28 that morning. That data had already uploaded, it was already stored, and nobody acted on it in those first critical days. If you are following this case, subscribe now. Justice over everything. Uncover the truth, demand justice. Share this video, because what that data contained changes everything about how this case should be understood. The FBI subpoenaed the pacemaker cloud data in the first week of February. What their forensic cardiac specialists found inside it is what this case is really about. The FBI had the pacemaker cloud data, they had the doorbell footage, they had blood evidence confirmed as Nancy's, and they had a hair sample recovered from inside the home, a rootless hair that did not belong to Nancy or any known family member. That hair sample became the most important piece of physical evidence in the entire case, and what happened to it next is one of the most significant investigative failures in a modern missing persons case. The Pima County Sheriff's Department sent the DNA evidence to DNA Labs International, a private lab in Florida that held a contract with the department, not to the FBI's lab at Quantico, not to a facility specializing in degraded biological material, to a private contractor. The FBI had asked for access to the DNA weeks earlier. They were not given it. FBI Assistant Director for Public Affairs, Ben Williamson, later confirmed publicly that the Bureau had requested to test the evidence 2 months before it was finally transferred. The Sheriff's Department made a different call. Rootless hair is one of the most difficult types of biological evidence to analyze. It lacks the follicle that contains nuclear DNA, which means traditional profiling methods often fail. The technology that can extract usable genetic material from rootless hair exists, but it requires specialized labs with proven methodology. C.C. Moore, one of the country's leading genetic genealogists, identified the lab the FBI would most likely turn to, Astrea Forensics, the same San Francisco-based lab that developed a DNA profile from rootless hair in the Gilgo Beach serial killer case. Moore has been personally involved in 6 cases where Astrea produced results from similar evidence. She was direct about the Florida lab's capability, stating she had not seen any successful rootless hair cases from them. While the DNA sat in the wrong lab, more time passed, and the crime scene itself was released back to the Guthrie family within days of the initial response. Criminologist Casey Jordan later questioned that decision publicly, suggesting that critical evidence may have been lost when the scene was no longer under investigative control. Moore pointed out that the suspect was inside that house for approximately 40 minutes. In her professional assessment, it is nearly impossible to spend that long in a space without leaving behind biological traces, saliva from the bite flashlight, skin cells on surfaces, touch DNA on doors, furniture, walls. The evidence was likely still in that house, but the window to collect it properly was closing. Weeks turned into months. The DNA eventually reached Quantico, but the delay cost the investigation something it cannot get back: time. And For an 84-year-old woman who has not been seen in over 90 days, time is the one resource that matters most. Now, the finding that changes everything about this case. The FBI's forensic cardiac team decoded the full 41-minute window of pacemaker data between 1:47 and 2:28 a.m. They mapped 4 distinct physiological phases. The first 3 confirmed what investigators suspected. Nancy was awake when the intruder arrived. Her body entered a sustained state of acute fear, and at some point, she was physically moved by someone else. The accelerometer inside her pacemaker recorded passive movement, not voluntary walking. Nancy was being carried, but it is the 4th phase that the FBI has been most careful about discussing. In the final 10 to 15 minutes before the pacemaker lost contact with her home monitoring unit, the data shifted again. Nancy's heart rate variability, the natural beat-to-beat fluctuation that a conscious person's heart produces, began decreasing significantly. In forensic cardiology, that pattern has one specific clinical meaning. The central nervous system's control over cardiac function was being suppressed. Consciousness was being altered. The interpretation from the FBI's specialists was direct: pharmacological sedation. Someone administered a sedative to Nancy Guthrie during those final minutes. That single finding redraws the entire profile of whoever did this. You do not carry medical-grade sedatives by accident. You acquire them, you plan for them, you bring them with specific intent. The type of compounds that produce this cardiac signature, rapid onset, measurable suppression of heart rate variability, are not available at a pharmacy. They require a clinical connection, a prescription trail, a hospital source, or a black market chain that itself creates traceable evidence. The sedation pattern also narrows the range of substances that could have produced it, and narrowing the substance narrows the list of people with the access and knowledge to obtain it. The FBI is following that procurement trail right now. This was not a break-in. This was not opportunistic. Someone studied Nancy's home, disabled her cameras, entered with equipment and sedatives, subdued an 84-year-old woman, carried her out, and drove away. All within 41 minutes. Every step was planned, and the device inside Nancy's chest recorded the evidence of that plan in a format that cannot be altered, disputed, or erased. This case has no ending yet. No arrest, no named suspect, no confirmed location for Nancy Guthrie. And that absence is itself a lesson this country needs to hear. An 84-year-old woman was taken from her home in one of the safest neighborhoods in Tucson. The person who did it came prepared, equipped with sedatives, gloves, a backpack, and enough knowledge of her security system to disable it in seconds. They spent 41 minutes inside her home. They carried her out. They drove away. And more than 90 days later, no one has been held accountable. The system that was supposed to protect Nancy failed at nearly every level. The first 48 hours, the most critical window in any missing persons case, were consumed by jurisdictional confusion. The FBI was kept at arm's length for 4 days. DNA evidence was routed to a private lab in Florida instead of Quantico, costing weeks of processing time on biological material that requires the most advanced technology available. The crime scene was released back to the family within days. A sergeant inside the sheriff's own department described the early response as a disorganized mess, where detectives were not even tracking which witnesses had already been interviewed. None of those failures are theoretical. They are documented. And for Nancy Guthrie, they translated into lost time she did not have. The profilers who reviewed this case agree on one thing. The person on the porch was not the architect. Someone else planned this operation. Someone with knowledge of Nancy's life, her routine, her vulnerabilities. Someone who obtained controlled substances, arranged transportation, and may have already eliminated the one person who could identify them. That individual is still out there, and every expert who has spoken publicly about this case believes they had a connection to Nancy's world. This is what a planned crime against an elderly person looks like. Not random, not impulsive, studied, resourced, executed against someone living alone in a quiet neighborhood where nobody was watching at 1:47 in the morning. Nancy's pacemaker is still running inside her chest right now. It is still logging every heartbeat, every physiological change, every moment. The complete record of what she has experienced since February 1st is stored inside a device no larger than a matchbox, waiting to be read. The DNA is at Quantico. The procurement trail is active. The FBI tip line is 1-800-CALL-FBI. Pima County's line is 52-035-14900. If you know something, even something small, now is the time. Justice over everything. Uncover the truth. Demand justice. Tell me in the comments, what do you think investigators should be focused on right now? Subscribe, share this with someone who needs to see it, and stay with this channel. This case is not over.